For 9 agonizing months, my mother-in-law treated my pregnancy like a battlefield, waging war against me as she compared every moment to her daughters. Each milestone became another round of competition, another excuse for drama. I've been married to my husband for over 2 years, but we've been together for 7. He's everything I ever wanted, my perfect partner, my best friend. My family adores him. Being Mexican, I have a huge, tightly knit family, and not once have I heard a bad word about him. He treats everyone with kindness, always the gentleman, which is exactly what made me fall in love with him. We rarely fight, except when the subject is his mother. And that's because my mother-in-law is a nightmare. My husband's family is much smaller than mine, just his parents and one sister, who got married last year. His parents are the picture of small-town conservatism, clinging to outdated ideals. His mother, in particular, is fiercely controlling, obsessed with keeping her family traditions intact. Holidays? She demanded full attendance. Disobedience? Met with dramatic outbursts. The first time I met them, my father-in-law was welcoming, his easygoing nature making it simple to get along. His sister, though she had been away for college, quickly became like a sister to me. But his mother? From the moment I walked through that door, she had already decided I was unworthy. When they asked about my job, I proudly told them I was a marine biologist dedicated to conserving marine life. My father-in-law's face lit up, he thought it was incredible. My mother-in-law? A frown, tight-lipped silence. I brushed it off. But later, my father-in-law called my husband, relaying a message that left me stunned. She wanted him to break up with me. According to her, I wasn't the right kind of woman. I didn't fit her mold. Women should be homemakers, nurturing, dependent. I was independent. Successful. And that, in her eyes, made me unfit to be her son's wife. Worse, she feared I'd refuse to be a housewife after marriage. She wanted him to find someone better. But my husband didn't waver. He made it clear to his father, who he married was none of his mother's business. His unwavering support reassured me. If he hadn't stood up for me then, I might have walked away. But as we got more serious, so did her hostility. At first, it was subtle. Little digs when we were alone, comments about how real wives should prioritize home and husband. Remarks on my supposed lack of femininity, questioning whether I could even bear children. At first, I laughed them off. But she wasn't joking. One evening, over dinner, she launched into a nostalgic tirade about the good old days when women stayed home and men provided. My husband, ever the realist, gently reminded her that times had changed, and that he was grateful to have a wife who could stand beside him as an equal. That set her off. With fire in her eyes, she declared that women should be women, and men should be men. A pointed look in my direction made it obvious, this was a direct attack. I stayed silent, my pulse pounding, but my father-in-law, surprisingly, tried to de-escalate. That only made her angrier. Enough. I rose from my seat and asked my husband to take me home. Without hesitation, he got up. The disappointment in his eyes as he looked at his mother said it all. We left without another word. Later, my father-in-law called, trying to smooth things over, even apologizing on her behalf. But I was done. I made it clear, her opinion on my career and my marriage was irrelevant. My husband backed me up. If she couldn't respect me, she wouldn't see us. Perhaps that scared her, because soon after, she apologized. A hollow effort, but I let it slide for the sake of peace. But snakes don't change their nature. A few months later, before we were married, my husband and I moved in together. Then came an incredible opportunity, a research expedition that would take me away for a few weeks. The moment she found out, she called. Who's going to take care of the house? And my son? Confused, I put her on speaker so my husband could hear. What do you mean? I asked. Her response made my blood boil. Now that we lived together, I needed to grow up. No more running off on expeditions. No more prioritizing my career. My duty, according to her, was to stay home and be a proper partner. My husband didn't hold back. I don't need anyone taking care of me. We're equal partners. She bristled. If I refused to give up my career, then we had no business getting married. His response? A sharp mind your own business, followed by hanging up. When he proposed, she was furious. But her anger hit a whole new level when she learned we wanted a small wedding. With my large family, inviting everyone was impossible. So, we compromised, only immediate family and closest friends, planning a later celebration for the rest. My mother-in-law? She had other plans. She insisted on inviting all her long-lost friends, as if our wedding were some grand reunion. My husband shut that down immediately, asking if she'd be footing the bill. She was appalled. You both make good money, how could you even ask that? We laughed. Our decision was final, a small wedding. If she invited guests behind our backs, she could pay for them. She wasn't happy, but she had no choice. At the wedding, she made her displeasure known, whispering complaints, scowling at my gown, making a spectacle of herself. I ignored her. For one day, I refused to let her poison my happiness. Thankfully, my sister-in-law saw what was happening and made it her mission to keep my mother-in-law away from me. Then, last April, the best news arrived. I was pregnant. We had been trying for a while, so this was a dream come true. At 9 weeks, we finally shared the news with our closest family and friends. And my mother-in-law? She was far from pleased. The news of my pregnancy was supposed to be a joyous moment, but my mother-in-law turned it into yet another point of contention. She wasn't the first to hear. And that was unacceptable. Her voice was sharp when she called, brimming with outrage. As my husband's mother, she insisted she had every right to be the first to know. Anything less was a betrayal. She was disappointed in me, deeply so. I wasn't in the mood for this nonsense. Calmly, I explained that we had chosen to wait before sharing such an important milestone. If she had a problem with that, she was welcome to take it up with my husband. I certainly wasn't going to sit through another lecture on how a proper woman should behave. Just a month after that exhausting call, fate decided to throw us a twist. My sister-in-law, glowing with excitement, revealed that she, too, was expecting. Shock rippled through the family, but so did joy. Our children would grow up together. There was just one catch. She wasn't married. She had a devoted, long-term boyfriend, someone we all knew and liked, but that hardly mattered to my mother-in-law. A baby before marriage? Scandalous. Predictably, she made a spectacle of her disapproval. But my husband was unwavering in his support for his sister, and, eventually, even my mother-in-law relented. My father-in-law, on the other hand, was overcome with emotion. 2 grandchildren at once, it was more than he ever hoped for. As my sister-in-law and I navigated pregnancy side by side, we found solace in each other. We swapped advice, shared our worries, and celebrated the small victories together. Shopping for baby clothes, setting up nurseries, dreaming about our little ones, it was a bond neither of us had expected, but both of us treasured. And that's when my mother-in-law decided to turn it into a competition. Suddenly, every aspect of our pregnancies became a measuring stick. If I felt nauseous, she'd smugly announce that my sister-in-law barely ever vomited. Clearly, her body was better suited for motherhood. If I needed rest, she'd remark on how my sister-in-law was still bustling around like nothing had changed. My career became yet another reason why I was inferior. Unlike me, my sister-in-law was a homemaker, which, according to my mother-in-law, made her naturally more equipped to raise a child. I did my best to brush it off, but it grated on me. My sister-in-law hated it just as much. When my gender reveal approached, I decided I wanted my sister-in-law to be the one to handle the results. She spoke to my doctor, prepared the envelope, and ensured everything went smoothly. Later, when it was her turn, I did the same for her. But the moment my mother-in-law found out, she erupted. She stormed over to our house, her fury palpable. I had stolen this moment from her. It was her right to organize the gender reveal, and my husband needed to start putting his foot down with me. My husband, already exhausted by her antics, wasn't having it. He calmly but firmly told her to leave. If she continued down this road, she wouldn't just be cut off from us, she'd be cut off from her grandchild. Cue the theatrics. Tears. Wailing. A desperate plea that she only wanted what was best for her grandchildren. But eventually, she left. Not long after, my father-in-law and sister-in-law called, both concerned. We told them everything. My sister-in-law was horrified. She urged me to rest, knowing that stress was the last thing I needed. Then came Christmas. Traveling was out of the question, I was too far along, and my doctor advised against long journeys. My husband relayed the news to his mother. She was livid. "You're pulling away from your family," she accused. He stood firm. She hung up mid-conversation. We thought that was the end of it. A week later, however, she sent a text. "Be at our house. Sharp. 4 p.m. No request. No question. A demand." My husband reminded her, again, that we weren't coming. This time, she called, her voice a screeching storm of accusations. How dare he avoid family? Was I the one keeping him away? He remained calm but unyielding. We made this decision. Together. She lost it. "Control your woman," she snapped. That was the moment something clicked. She wasn't just overbearing, she was toxic. Day by day, her need for control became more suffocating. My husband and sister-in-law saw it too, and they stood by me. But dealing with her? Exhausting. Then, everything changed. At 33 weeks, I went into preterm labor. A whirlwind of panic, hospital lights, and rushed decisions. At 34 weeks, our son entered the world via an emergency C-section. My husband, after ensuring both of us were stable, shared the news in the family group chat. Congratulations poured in. Happiness. Relief. Except for my mother-in-law. Instead, she raged. Why hadn't she been informed I was in labor? Why wasn't she in the delivery room, witnessing her grandchild's birth? As if that was ever going to happen. I ignored her ranting. I had a newborn to focus on. Then we announced his name. Another meltdown. "It's too Mexican," she wailed to my husband. "Change it." He refused. She tried to negotiate. "At least make it his middle name." Nope. When she finally met our son, she did something bizarre. She refused to call him by his actual name. Instead, she started using some completely different one. We were stunned. "It's my special little name for him," she justified. My husband shut it down immediately. "Call him by his real name, or don't call him anything at all." She sulked but relented. Then came the breastfeeding complaints. According to her, breastfeeding was unfair. Since I had to take him away to feed, it meant she got less time with him. My mother, who was present, firmly reminded her that a newborn needs breast milk. My mother-in-law dismissed it. The resentment simmered. Her demands grew bolder. And then, she crossed a line. She invited me to lunch. Over and over, I declined. I was exhausted. But she insisted. Begged. Said it was urgent. So, I went. At first, she was all smiles. We ordered our food, exchanged pleasantries. Then she got to the point. "Who will be your son's godparent?" she asked, her tone deceptively light. I hesitated. I knew she wouldn't like my answer. Calmly, I told her. My sister-in-law and I had agreed we would be each other's children's godparents. Her reaction was immediate. She burst into tears, wailing in the middle of the restaurant. People turned to stare, but she didn't care. "How could you do this to me?" she cried. "Your sister-in-law has her family. I should be the godmother." I was done. Keeping my voice level, I reminded her of her own words. She always claimed my sister-in-law was the better mother. So shouldn't she be thrilled that my child would be under her care? She wasn't. She argued. Insisted that only she could be trusted. I refused to entertain the conversation further. "If you have an issue, take it up with my husband." Later, I told my sister-in-law what happened. She was furious. My husband was just as baffled. He started ignoring his mother's calls. Then, last week, my sister-in-law gave birth. She wanted me in the delivery room. I was honored. That night, while I supported her through labor, my husband and my mother cared for our son at home. By morning, her boyfriend took over, and I finally went home to rest. Throughout the day, my phone buzzed, call after call from my mother-in-law. I ignored them. That evening, my husband returned from visiting his sister, an amused look on his face. I assumed he was happy to meet his niece. I was wrong. When my husband returned home, his expression was unreadable until a slow, satisfied smirk tugged at his lips. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, and said, "You won't believe what happened." Curiosity sparked in my chest. "What?" He exhaled, shaking his head in near disbelief. "My sister," she finally snapped. That got my attention. Apparently, my sister-in-law had reached her breaking point with our mother-in-law's toxicity. And this time, she didn't just push back, she shut the door completely. No contact. Permanently. The final straw? Mother-in-law's unannounced arrival at the hospital. Without warning, she'd barged in, demanding to see the baby. But my sister-in-law had anticipated something like this. Before she even went into labor, she'd given the nurses explicit instructions: if mother-in-law showed up, she wasn't to be let in under any circumstances. Father-in-law? He was welcomed with open arms. But mother-in-law? Not a chance. I sat there, stunned. Of all the people in the family, my sister-in-law had always been the peacemaker, the one who tried to smooth things over. For her to take such a drastic step meant that she had truly had enough. Then it hit me, this was why mother-in-law had been frantically calling me all day. She wasn't just looking to vent, she wanted a scapegoat. She probably thought I had poisoned my sister-in-law against her. Or worse, she was hoping to manipulate me into convincing my sister-in-law to reverse her decision. Later, when I spoke to my sister-in-law, she confirmed my suspicions. After witnessing everything I had endured for years, she finally saw her mother's true nature. She wasn't just overbearing, she was dangerous. And she refused to let her daughter grow up under that kind of influence. For the first time, mother-in-law was facing real consequences. And for the first time, she had no control over them. The fallout was swift. She was cut off entirely, left grasping at straws while precious moments of her granddaughter's early life slipped through her fingers. That night, as I lay awake, a single question haunted me. Would it be too cruel for us to do the same? Update 1. Hey everyone! First, I just want to say thank you for all your support, it means the world to me. I never expected this to gain so much attention so quickly. Now, for the update. Since learning about my sister-in-law's decision, my husband and I have had zero contact with mother-in-law. She still calls. We still ignore her. But ignoring her isn't enough anymore. I finally voiced what had been weighing on my mind. I told my husband that I thought it was time. Time to cut her off completely. For our own sanity. For our son's future. He listened. Then he nodded. Because the truth is, there's no guarantee she won't treat our son the same way she treats me. To those asking why we put up with it for so long, you have to understand, my husband was raised in this. He grew up in the storm and didn't realize it wasn't normal until he saw the damage it watched her vent. Let her scream. Let her dig her own grave. Then, in the calmest voice imaginable, he said, "You're right. I do need to step up and be more of a man." Silence. Then, a delighted gasp. "Exactly! That's what I've been saying all along." He cut her off. "Which is why, as the man of this family, I've decided to remove you from our lives. Permanently." The line went dead for a second. Then, the explosion. She screeched that she was coming over, that no one could keep her from her grandson. He didn't waver. "If you show up, we'll call the police." That's when she turned on me. "This is her doing, isn't it?" she spat. "That woman has poisoned you against your own family. My husband's doing to me. But he's always been on my side. He has always defended me. The problem? His mother is relentless. So, we made a decision. We set up a group call with my sister-in-law and father-in-law. We laid it all out. And you know what? They backed us completely. Now, there's just one thing left to do. We have to tell mother-in-law. Update 2. If you've been waiting for an update, buckle up, this one's a ride. Last night, my husband picked up the phone. He called her. The moment she answered, she unleashed a furious tirade. How dare he ignore her for so long? Didn't he care about his own mother? And most importantly, when could she finally meet her grandson? My husband LaPatience snapped. "Oh, so it's just us? What about my sister? She cut you off too. Was that her fault? Or are you finally ready to admit that you are the problem?" Her voice shook with rage. She only turned against me because of her. That was it. My husband had heard enough. "You want to blame someone," he said. "Blame yourself. For being bitter. For being a racist. For being so toxic that no one wants you around." Then, without another word, he blocked her. And so did I. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of peace. I called my family to let them know what happened. I also warned them, if mother-in-law reached out, they were not to engage. I won't lie. A small part of me feels sorry for my husband and sister-in-law. They deserved a mother who loved them unconditionally. But I also know this, I will never let myself be dragged back into that toxicity again. Update 3. It's been 2 months since my last update, and I have good news. Our son is thriving. My sister-in-law and I? Closer than ever. We make sure our babies have regular playdates, and watching them bond is the sweetest thing I've ever seen. I hope they grow up to be lifelong best friends. And in even better news, my sister-in-law is getting married. We all saw it coming, but it's official now. She and her partner are tying the knot. Now, on to the real update. We have remained completely no contact with mother-in-law. For those concerned about safety, don't worry, we took precautions. Security cameras. Lock changes. She has no way of getting near us. Not that she would try, because by now, everyone knows exactly why we cut her off. And that must be humiliating for her. At first, she tried to manipulate father-in-law into speaking to us on her behalf. But he shut that down fast. And when he did, something shifted. Maybe hearing it from him finally made her realize just how far she had pushed us away. A few weeks ago, she did the unthinkable. She sent father-in-law a message. She wanted him to tell me she was sorry. I don't buy it. Neither does my husband. Which is why, to this day, we haven't responded. Life without her interference? Peaceful. And I intend to keep it that way.